The Darkness at Thunder Mountain, Chapter 13. What are hieroglyphs? Lacie asked. They are really old Indian words, written out like a story in pictures, Weston explained. The faded pictures were barely visible. It was hard to make out the story. See, here's a person, and here's another person. They're holding hands. Weston pointed to the pictures as he described what he was seeing. And this triangle looks like a tent. And this is a crescent moon. Like the crescent moon that's been in the sky ever since we left the cabin, Lacie said. Yep, and look at the streak by the moon. I wonder if that's an arrow, Weston said. I think it's the glowing streak we saw in the sky, Lacie said. Weston looked at the whole picture, trying to understand the story behind the words. This is just like us. This is our story, Lacie. Weston got goosebumps, realizing that whoever had been in the cave making those hieroglyphs had been in a similar situation. Weston's mind wandered. He pictured a small Indian girl and her brother wandering here in the dark without their parents. Had Geo visited them too? Had they been followed by wild animals and a strange man? Weston looked over at Lacie. She had already fallen asleep, exhausted from the many miles they traveled. He was glad to see his sister was finding refuge from the stressful situation and that she could rest and dream about things back home like her dolls and friends. Weston drifted off to sleep thinking about the Indian children. Mike and Layla walked in the dark hand in hand. They were dark-skinned and were wearing clothes made from elk hide. Their shoes were made of leather. Mike could have been 12 years old. He carried a pack of arrows over his shoulder and held a bow in hand. Mike could hunt. He'd been hunting since he was a small boy. Layla was younger. She could have only been 6 years old. Her hair was long and black. Her 2 braids hung forward over her shoulders. She pulled along a small homemade doll that was ragged. The doll's hair was made from real hair. Its body was made from wood and leather. The way Layla clung to the doll showed that it was her most prized possession. Their faces were dirty and weathered. The only light they had was the occasional fire that they would build. They didn't stay in one place for long and spent most of their time traveling or stopping to eat plant roots and berries. Mike seemed on guard, looking around to spot danger. Layla's dirty face was streaked with dry tears. She missed her parents terribly. Mike found a cave in a rocky hill, and he was able to build a fire. He would hunt for rabbits and cook meat for he and Layla to eat. He took charcoal from one of their many fires to draw pictures, telling the story of their hardships and the hard times they'd endured. Weston awoke from his vivid dream about the Indian children. He wondered if Mike and Layla had died, if those were even their names, and if they'd ever escaped the land where time didn't exist and the sun didn't rise. He looked at Lacie. She was still asleep, and he didn't want to wake her. Without disturbing Lacie, Weston carefully pulled the apple out of the backpack and began to eat. The juice was the most delicious he tasted, although it could hardly quench his terrible thirst. As Weston ate, he took a mental survey of the items left in the backpack. He had 2 empty plastic water bottles, a granola bar wrapper, a peanut butter granola bar, toilet paper, a small box of matches, and the axe. Weston looked at Larry, who quietly slept further into the cave where it was too narrow for the siblings to go. It wasn't until the apple was gone that Weston realized he hadn't saved even a single bite for Lacie. He had been so hungry that he mindlessly ate the entire apple without even thinking about sharing. He felt guilty and decided that Lacie would have the last granola bar. Weston's heart sank as he thought about how they'd find water or food in the dry, desolate darkness.